Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Remette Zodiac, aka the Remette Kingfisher. I think there was something going on with some other knife being named the Kingfisher at the same time, and so they had changed it. In any case, the review is going to list it as the Zodiac, but it will be referenced as both, just depending on which keyword you use to find it. I will link this knife either way down in the description so that you guys can check it out if you want to. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to Remette for providing this knife review. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. And for the time being, at least on TikTok at _metal_complex. This knife has a unique feature. The disassembly process is made possible by the backspacer, which is actually the tool, the only tool required for you to take this knife apart. It's really neat. Not the first time we've ever seen the backspacer be the tool, but the way that they did it is awesome. There's also essentially zero likeliness that backspacer will come off while you're using it because of the exact point of leverage and how much force it actually takes to get that backspacer off of there. We'll talk more about it. Really cool though. Also, I think the price is fair considering the materials are also heat treating that M390 according to their website between 60 and 62. Thank you. Very cool. Other companies, it drives me nuts that their excuses, they just can't do it. They for whatever reason or another. No, it's too hard. It costs too much. Come on. There's lots of companies that are able to do it. It makes people happy, right? Obviously, pros and cons to increasing the HRC. But when it comes to M390 at this general geometry, most people prefer, including me, to see it between 60 and 62. So very cool that Remette is doing that. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of the Zodiac, aka Kingfisher. Overall length is coming in at about 8 inches. If you include that lanyard loop there, it's about 8 1/16. Blade length is 3.5. Cutting edge is also 3.5. Let's do some size comparisons up against the Demco AD10. And where is it? The Demco AD20.5. This guy's what I'd call a full-size knife. It's just not as big or robust as knives like the AD10. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Once again, closer in size to the PM2. Quite a bit larger than knives like the Para 3. And finally, up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca, almost identical in size. And honestly, the handle length and blade length, it's almost identical to the Ritter Hogue. How is the action? I took this knife apart in the unboxing. You can go back and watch it if you want. But I took it apart in the unboxing and put it back together. The action was exactly the same. The centering was the same. Honestly, the flipper tab is shaped really well. It's a nice, satisfying break of the detent, nice, satisfying throw of the blade. There's no double clutch. The action is wonderful. These tetrahedrons or whatever you're using to deploy the blade also work really well, either for the reverse flick or the thumb flick. Honestly, it's just really nice. It's all well placed. It's nice to see a new company because for a little bit, I wasn't sure what to think of Remette. You don't really know until you handle a whole bunch of their stuff, and then you find out, they're either a company trying to jump on the knife wagon, right, just kind of throwing stuff together, or because everybody's out to make money, or they're a company who really cares about the designs. They really think about the designs. They try to bring fun things for the knife community. I feel like the people involved with Remette are actually knife people. With this design in particular, number one, there's been a few cases of, the community pointing out issues with certain knives made by Remette, and they've been very quick to correct things, which means they're listening and trying to be involved. But also, I really like the variety that they're offering. It's not just, are they using titanium? Are they using M390? It's not just that, because anybody can do that, right? It's what are you using those materials for? What are you doing with it? And most of the time, they make things that are designy and functional and have some unique elements, right? Or some more unique elements than we normally see. This is a great example of that. But the fact that they got that whole package together and still made it a great organic flipper, and at the same time put these thumb studs. I'm going to call them studs, right? They're not really studs. Put them in a place, in a position that look good and, functionally are satisfying and functionally work. It's all just really great. So the action's awesome. It runs on bearings, no double clutch, all of that. It's really good is what I'm trying to say. Thickness. Let's do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's about exactly the same. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. It's going to be easier to carry, a little easier than knives like the PM2 in terms of dimensions. It might be a little bit heavier because of the titanium. And it's still bigger, it's still longer than the Para 3, not quite as tall. For materials, we are looking at, they list this as DLC coated. So I don't know. If it is DLC, it's chalky, right? And the issue with that is this is a steel bit. Well, okay. Yeah, that didn't do anything to it. Okay. I really thought I was going to make a point. I didn't know what to do. I was really expecting that to mark it up. So what I usually point out is with a chalky DLC, even if it is real DLC, the problem is it sort of pulverizes whatever material is being ground against it, right? It sort of pulverizes. I'll use the blade here. Yeah. A real DLC is not going to scratch. Not very easily anyway. Yeah, the chalky stuff sometimes will leave residue behind, leaving people to believe that they scratched through the DLC when in reality they just turned whatever they were using into powder against the DLC and it sort of got embedded there. That looks like real DLC to me. And it certainly is acting like it. The titanium, see, it looks like maybe it leaves little streaks there. And they just come right back off. So, okay. Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, apparently that really is DLC. I think they offer this in a non-coated version as well, like the blade, but I think the frame is still DLC. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. M390, like I said, hardened between 60 and 62. And then some anodized titanium on there as well, which is a nice... I'm still trying to get over the fact that I was at a loss for words. I thought for sure, I was like, it's not really DLC. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Those are the materials. We do have some milling for weight reduction. Just a little bit, not a ton, but there is a little bit of milling for weight reduction. Weight on the Zodiac coming in at an unsurprising 4.3 ounces, which is not too heavy, but definitely not light. Decent ratios, and the balance is right where you put your index finger. So, okay. Let's go ahead and, well, we don't need to do a hardware check. This is normally the part where I plug my tools and say that they're very inexpensive and very recommendable, and that you can find them down in the description under the section that talks about the tools I use in this channel, or the pinned comment. But we don't need to do that today because legitimately the backspacer will, what you do is you lift up here and you just sort of pull. Oh, I'm sorry. You actually want the blade out. So a good practice is to tape the edge off, as so many of my viewers have pointed out when I don't do that on disassembly videos. But the edge of this backspacer will fit perfectly into that slot and the pivot. And once again, I did this in the video. You just unscrew it and the whole thing just comes apart. It's literally just floating pin construction. So if it doesn't want to come apart immediately, you can use a credit card or a couple of credit cards. Take some old credit cards, put them together, and then shape them into a tool and kind of tape them up so you get extra thickness. The rigidity will actually create a soft pry tool that will be able to help you get stuff like this apart. You can also literally, if you don't care about marking up the inside of your knife, you can actually use the backspacer as a pry tool to pull those pieces apart. It actually really comes apart easily. This hooks back into place underneath here, and then there's some tension right there. Quite a bit. Unlikely this is going to come out. And even if it does, as you saw, see, it takes quite a bit. Even if it does, it's still all held together with the pivot and these two standoffs that are just sort of press fit or floating, as they say in there. That's different than press fitting, but anyways. So yeah, the disassembly is incredibly easy, and you will literally always have the tool with you. That's awesome. I really like that, and I wish we saw that more often than we currently do. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness, and then I will get into the meat and potatoes of this review. Blade stock, that looks like 120, maybe 115. Oh, yeah, 115. Pretty darn thin. Okay. It's a pretty cool, pretty stylish knife. It kind of looks like the Gold Ranger's pocket knife. If you watched Power Rangers in the 90s, I remember the transition to that, I guess, that part of the show. I really like the combination of the gold and black. I think it looks cool. I love that they anode this out here. This is not a separate piece. That's just how they did it, and it looks really, really nice. I think that every part of this knife sort of flows with itself. Nothing looks out of place. Not everybody's going to love that we have a recurve. This is a very bizarre blade shape. It's sort of a recurve Tanto sheep's foot. Whatever. Here's the shape, right? You classify it however you want. It does get pretty darn thin behind the edge, and the only issue with this is when you're sharpening it, you're going to have to adjust your guided system to accommodate for this secondary edge. Now, if you sharpen by hand and you're Master Ninja Wizard Sharpener level 9000, then great, congratulations. But for the average person, that's going to be a little bit annoying, and this area in particular right here is going to start to look like a nub after a while, but okay. The other issue is, despite the thumb tetrahedrons being in a place that is really satisfying and very convenient for deployment, right? That should never be an afterthought. Thumb stud placement. Anything that has to do with the deployment should really be carefully considered. And these things are very satisfying to use to deploy the blade, but they are in the cutting bath by quite a bit, right? You can see there's a good, more than half an inch of the cutting edge, right, this is in the cutting path, right? So that's not a problem, though, most of the time, because you will be cutting at an angle, usually. If you cut straight down and as close as you can to your index finger, you're going to run into this. That's not a deal breaker, but it's something to be aware of. If you really want to, you can remove them. You'll have a little hole in the blade, but you can remove them and just use the flipper tab if you want to. I like that they've kept the billboarding to a minimum. It says Remette right here. Remette, I think this is fine, but especially when we have white text on a black blade, it really stands out. This is a very designy, very aesthetically pleasing knife. I mean, for people who, it looks like a very calculated, very well thought out design, and it's beautiful. So I want my eyes to be drawn to the design and not the Remette logo. But I can understand you still wanting it to be there. So I would recommend that you reduce this by 50 to 60% at least. It'd still be there, and you're still going to be able to see it, but minimizing your billboarding is definitely a good idea. But it's not really that big of a deal. Ergonomically, it's pretty darn comfortable. This is contoured. The edges are all knocked down. The flipper tab doesn't curve into your index finger. There's really only one position to grip it in, but that one position is comfortable. No jimping or anything like that. The pocket clip is milled and flat and rounded off at the edge. So I'm aware that it's there, but it's not like the biggest deal in the whole world. It is right there at about 50%. Sorry, I keep moving it up here. It's right there at about 50%. I wish it was a little bit shorter, but again, it's really not that big of a deal. I'm not super upset about it. There is no lanyard hole. There's a lanyard bar, which I'll always prefer over a hole, because oftentimes when there's a hole in the blade, designers move the pocket clip over to accommodate for the hole that almost nobody uses. Better to prioritize the position of the pocket clip and make the lanyard loop / hole / slot / whatever an afterthought, because that is what they are. They are afterthoughts for the vast majority of people. And if you are somebody who really, really cares about attaching a lanyard to your knife, this is pretty optimized. So there's really no reason to complain about it. It's just a really good way to do this. There is no mounting position for left-handed people. I mean, of course, lefties, you can take this knife and put it in your left-hand pocket, but that's not something I would advise, considering at that point, if you're carrying it the right way, right? That's just wrong for a bunch of reasons. Number one, you should never carry any pocket knife with the blade up against the front seam of your pocket, and you should be able to figure out why. And if you're left-handed and you carry it like this in your left-handed pocket with the flipper tab up against the back seam of your pocket, well, as soon as something bumps the back seam, the knife does this in your pocket, which is bad. So right-handed is the way to carry it, right? That's the way that it's mounted, like very specifically, so that the blade is pinned up against the back of your pocket and can't move, and you're much less likely to have something bump the flipper tab anyway. That's rare. It's not something that happens often, but the best way to get it to happen is to carry it with a right-handed mounted clip in the left-hand pocket with the flipper tab like this. My little brother likes to carry his knives like that, and I constantly point out that one day he's going to cut himself, and he will. He will, I guarantee it. But for now, he hasn't. So anyways, let's see here. I think the blade, because I'm flipping it, is coming slightly off center, which is normal until you decide to Loctite it. So I want to use this as an opportunity to demonstrate the tool. And we're just going to give it just a little, oh yeah, it definitely needed just a little bit of a turn. We're going to bring this back down and take a look at the centering again. And it's definitely coming closer. We're going to give that another little bit of a crank there. And we are right back to center. That is wonderful. How is the action? Oh, it is beautiful. Yeah, this is nice. These slots right here, you can use a flathead, but I would use the tool because it fits much better. It just makes a lot of sense. And then once again, putting the tool back on is as simple as letting that hook around like this. You want to do that while the blade is open because otherwise you run this into the blade and it will cause nicks. And that's something I want to talk about. It's one of the only downside of this. This has a nick in it right here because a couple of times I was trying to pull this tool out while the blade was closed. And what I was doing is it was rotating and the front of that was just mashing into the blade. So that's kind of a downside, just the way that it's designed. You really have to have the blade out to pull this off. And I've become very wary of having blades out and then pulling on other parts of the knife. That Remette, that Reich Lamella, the Gen 1, I had stitches in 2 places on my hand because I did not tape the blade off, which again is what you want to do in that situation. You want to have the blade taped off. Don't be stupid like me. But I was wrenching on a part of the knife and the blade was out. It was a part of the knife required in order to get the back sleeve off, and I was screwing around with it and I slipped and ran my hand into the blade. The newer versions of the Lamella have a release switch on the back, which makes that much better. But you can do that in the closed position. I think that anything like this, any part of the knife that's meant to detach or any lever or anything like it should operate while the knife is closed. Yes, you can take measures to protect yourself, but the ideal way to do it is when the blade is closed and already in a safe position. So it's not a deal breaker, but it is kind of a bummer that, unless you just don't care about the blade. If you try to wrench this off of here, the leverage will cause the blade to poke out as you pull it out. That's how close it is, right? So you kind of have to have the blade out to do it. But again, I don't think that's much of a deal breaker. I mean, as long as you're careful with the blade out, you just hold it, really, keep the blade away from you. Hold it here and then pull up. That's all you have to do, right? As long as you're not being stupid, then it'll work out. But, use me as an example. I didn't think I was being stupid and I cut myself really bad with the Lamella. It turns out I was being stupid. There's a stop pin located back here with some shouldering. No blade play, up, down, left, or right. Really cool. No pivot lash, no lock stick, no double clutch. Very smooth and consistent in here, with a nice clicky detent. You can see there, it really needs some Loctite. I always tell people, don't freak out if you flip your knife 10 times and it comes off center and you keep having to adjust the pivot. You don't need to send your knife back. Most people know this, right? But if you don't know this, this is my container of 242 blue Loctite. It's confusing because it's in a red container. You do not want red Loctite, which will have a different number on it. You want 242. This is strong enough to hold the pivot in place for a very long time, but not so strong that you can't get the pivot back off. It's very easy to use. I like knives that don't come with Loctite in the pivot because I like to do that myself. I like to get the blade tuned the way that I want, centered and all of that, then Loctite it, and then continue to use it, right? So if you're new, don't freak out if your blade comes off center or your pivot starts backing out. That's normal. Every knife in the whole world will do that given enough time. Get yourself some blue 242. I have had this for over 6 years now, and it literally just takes one drop. So that's the way to do it. Do not Loctite your handle hardware. I don't care what anybody says, don't do that. That's a bad idea. Okay, so what do I think of this knife? The thumb thing is in the cutting path a little bit. It's kind of a bummer that you have to have the blade out while you detach the backspacer tool. And it's also kind of a bummer that we have 2 completely separate edges, right? But those are minor complaints. Honestly, this is a cool looking knife and I love the idea of the backspacer tool. I love the fact that they're going out of their way to make sure that their M390 is heat treated properly, even on their coated blades. A lot of times, like companies like will do like a standard of 59 to 61, and then they'll have coated blades, and that's for their M390/20CV. Keep in mind, if you're new, every composition has a different optimal range. It is not static across the board. I don't want new people thinking anything under 60 is bad and anything over 60 is good. It depends on the composition. But for example, with CPM 20CV or M390, which are essentially the same compositions, they will hit those at 59 to 61 on an uncoated blade. And then on a coated blade, which generally brings the range down by 1 point, they'll have them even worse at 58 to 60. I think both ranges are unacceptable, but 60 to 62, or even some people make an argument for 63, gets a little brittle there, but I think that's the optimal range. According to their website, they're even hitting their coated blades. They must be taking extra steps to make sure that those coated blades are still within that appropriate range. I think that's pretty cool, especially considering this knife is about $219. Do I think that's fair? Yes, definitely. I think it's a really cool knife. I think it's well made. Obviously, the tolerances are really great. It's got a lot of personality, and I think you're getting your money's worth, right? It's made in China. If they made this exact same thing in the United States, it's so hard for people to accept this. But a lot of people say for that much money, you should buy an American knife. If they're making exactly this in the United States, and I mean exactly, not just the same materials, I mean exactly this knife in the United States, it would cost so much more. You're looking at a $450 knife nowadays, right? So yeah, I like this. I think it's cool. I wish that they would do a version of it with a continuous blade. In fact, Remette, this idea of using the backspacer as the tool, you should make that a regular thing. I think that not with every knife, but I think it would be really cool to have designs with backspacer tools. I think people would really like that, and you could continue to evolve this. It's a good idea ever since Rick Hinder did it on the MP1. But I think this system is probably a little bit better. It's a little bit more convenient. So yeah, this is going to go in my recommended knives playlist. So make sure and check this out. Check out Remette Knives. They're doing a great job. Can't wait to see what else they come up with in the future. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. And for the moment, I seem to have lost that other cardigan. But you can also, here we go, you can follow me on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.